All right, I want to talk about this movie called Zero Charisma. It's a 2013 movie, and it's for a limited audience in many ways. You kind of have to understand the role-playing game culture. You have to understand like the kinds of personalities that these kind of games attract, and the kinds of problems you may encounter when you're in a group of guys playing a role-playing game. So it all kind of centers around this guy Scott, and this is why I kept watching. It's like, oh, that guy has a great name. Sounds like a real smart guy. And he kind of is a pretty smart guy, but he's very atypical of many of the gamer types in the D&D role-playing game culture. He wears like, Slayer shirts and, Grim Reaper on a horse in the moonlight shirt. And he's listening to the metal all day, obscure metal all day long. Painting his figurines and coming up with ideas for the game and stuff like that. He spends a lot of time preparing for the game. He's the game master of his crew. And the first hiccup, I guess, the beginning of the conflict in the movie is one of the players that he normally has quits gaming because he's about to get divorced. His wife's going to divorce him, So he's like, I got to quit the gaming. I got to get my life together. I want to do everything I can to keep my wife. Respect. But Scott is pissed off. He's like, you can't. We've been doing this for 4 years and so forth. You can't leave. He's like, I got to, there are more important things than gaming. So he leaves, and so he's looking for a fourth player, and I never really understood this thing. It was like, there has to be a certain number of players. It's like, no. And the whole idea, I guess, is because he has scaled his adventure to that many players. And so as a game master, that means he has to do a lot of rework to, rework everything, I guess. But in many ways, you start realizing that this guy is not a very nice person. He's not attractive. This movie's incredibly well cast. He's not an attractive guy. He's large without being, like, physically fit, And he's incredibly into the D&D thing and painting figures and having little fights with his figures, And you kind of get a glimpse into his home life. I don't know if those plot points were necessary, where he's living with his grandma and his mom's just a terrible person. And the whole idea is kind of to set up his psychology about why he's such a tyrant as a game master in many ways. And so, and he's like the least social of his nerdy group of friends, and they're already not very social at all. So they lost this other player, and he goes to this hobby shop that he used to work at, but he got fired from, and I'm not going to explain why. The truth comes out, and it's incredibly embarrassing. So he got fired from there, and he's going to look for another player, where he runs across this other guy here. That guy, Miles. And he talks to him, hey, why don't you come and join our game? We're down a guy, and I could use him. He's like, oh, okay, fine. And so he comes over, this Miles guy, he comes over, and he brings beer with him. He goes, you guys help yourself. And Scott says, well, we generally don't have alcohol. I don't drink beer because I'm allergic to alcohol. So if I have one beer, it's like 10. And like, oh, okay. And so the other guys are like, is it okay if I have a beer? Beer? And he's just kind of giving them the hairy eyeball. It's like, really? You're going to drink a beer? Really? And you start to realize that Scott is like a little bit of a tyrant. And Miles makes a character, and he plays with him for a session. And he like settles this argument that they've been having for years about which is faster, the Millennium Falcon or the USS Enterprise. And so he comes in and like the first day, like settles it. And Scott's upset, because like I'm the smart one. I'm the one who always has the answers. I'm the game master and so forth. And so he feels challenged by someone like Miles coming in. All right. Additionally, his other friends, these guys over here, are working on a film project, an indie film project of their own. And every week they come up, they show, oh, we did another scene. Check it out. And they're showing it to their friends, and stuff like that. And he's like, he never put it on their blog, but they showed it to Miles, and Miles says, oh, I run a certain website, and he names his website, and they're like, oh, geekchic.com or something like that. Pretty good website. And they're like, you run geekchic.com? It's like, yeah, I'd love to take your video and put it up on my website. And he does. They give the video to Miles. Miles puts it on his high traffic website, and they get like 400,000 views. because he helped him out. And so everyone starts liking this Miles guy more because Scott's kind of a tyrant. I don't know how many times I can say tyrant, but I've run across game masters like this, you know. It's a common story, you know. Additionally, Miles is a far more well-adjusted person. He has an attractive girlfriend and stuff like that. You find out later that he has parties with his cool friends, and he compartmentalizes his game friends, and they take offense to it and stuff like that. They end up kind of making Miles into a jerk, and it's because clearly Scott is the protagonist, but he's actually an antagonist, if you ask me. That's all he does is antagonize throughout the entire movie. And so, you know, when it comes to a tyrant like that, they have a conversation once where he's like, "Oh, I'm the keeper of the stones, and I'll give you the stones if you go to the wizard up the trail, and you go break into the wizard's study, and inside is a long phoenix feather." And Miles says, "Nah, screw that. I'm just going to throw the sword right at his head and steal the light stones that we need and get out of here. Let's skip this step, right?" And he's like, no, you can't do that. It's like, "Yes, I can. Can't we do anything we want in this game?" It's like, "Yeah, but I planned out this thing." It's like, "Well, can I do it or not?" And he's like, "Yes, but it's very difficult, and it's going to take a 20. Guy rolls a 20. Scott gets pissed off and wants to storm out. And he wants to bring his closest friend with him, this guy here. And he's like, no. He wants to bring the other players with him. And they're like, no. We want to have fun. And Scott and Miles have this conversation. It's like, it's supposed to be a story. It's supposed to be a story I'm creating. And Miles is like, so no one else gets to make any decisions in the story that we're creating together? And he's like, well, yeah, but it was supposed to be a good story. And Miles is like, no. It's supposed to be fun. This is a game. It's supposed to be fun. And Scott storms off, and he's like, if you guys want a game with me again, you'll don't even think about coming back. And he's like, you know, and it just shows like he's a child in many ways. And so, and there's some weird, I don't know, sexual problems, I guess, with this guy, because there's this thing where his friend had a zit on his face, and he's like, "There's a zit on your face. I got to pop it." And he like pins him on the bed and pops the zit on his face. And then he's like rolls off and goes, oh. And then he pulls toilet paper out. It's like, dude, this is way too sexual. And then he's like, "You want to sleep over tonight?" And it's like, dude, what the hell? All right. Additionally, there's a scene where he meets Miles' girlfriend, who is a very attractive woman. And as you imagine, guys like this aren't very good at dealing with very attractive women. And it kind of like sets him off his game, and he's like immediately on the defensive. And he gets into another argument with Miles, and it's not good. You know, this guy's just in a downward spiral. You know, he doesn't understand. And there's a scene where this guy who's supposed to be like Gary Gygax, you know, the guy who invented Dungeons & Dragons, was coming to speak at that hobby shop that he used to work at. And so he comes there and tries to challenge Gary Gygax, trying to get that guy on his side in this argument, trying to explain, like, the story is more important than the game. And the guy who plays Gary Gygax, clone or whatever, he ends up like yelling at Scott. It's like, no, if your players are not having a good time, you have failed as a dungeon master, game master. It's so Scott just can't take it. He's like, I worked so hard. I put so many hours into it. Yeah, that's nobody else's fault. All right? Because, you know, you don't really have a job. You know, you're an adult male. You know, you're not paying any bills. You're living with your grandma. You know, you need to man up. Miles has a job, a successful job. You know, he can interact interpersonally with people and not piss them off all the time. And there's even a line where Miles says, you know, "It's not my fault that you're so unlikable." And he has a point. I don't like that they made Miles out to be a jerk, because what happens is Scott crashes a party at Miles' house, and he says, he's my nemesis, I'm going to kick his ass, and shit like that. And he creates a confrontation with Miles at his house. So, but he's drinking alcohol too, so Miles is concerned about his alcohol allergy. So he calls his other friend, and he says, "Hey, I'm having a party over here, and Scott's over here, and he's crashed it and drinking here. And we've already argued several times, and I've told him to get out of my apartment and stuff like that." And so these guys are like, "You're having a party? You didn't invite us?" It's like, yeah, what's wrong with compartmentalizing your nerdy friends and your more social friends? I don't see anything wrong with that. But these guys took offense to it. And so they come there to get Scott from the party, but Scott ends up getting into a fight with Miles, getting his ass kicked. And Miles calls, you nerds should get out of my house. And that's why he's the bad guy. Get out of my house, you nerds. Because you play D&D too, man. You're a nerd too. And it's funny. I think that like every game master, every dungeon master should watch this movie and understand like the dangers of getting too involved in your own creation, you know? And there's even a scene where Scott is telling us like it's basically it goes back to the cavemen days, like sitting around the campfire and your communal storytelling. You know, I tell the story of this great hero, and then somebody else tells the story of another great hero, and then another guy comes up with a story for a villain, and then you make them interact. You know, I was even thinking about like Peter and the Wolf, you know, where each instrument was a different character. You know, you know, even the bassoon. This is maybe a little nerdy. I wonder if people are still watching. Anyway. Zero charisma. It has a limited market because not everyone plays role-playing games. I get that. So I give it 8 of 13 stars in terms of, I think that even people who have a very basic understanding about role-playing games and what they are, they can understand that there could be this kind of interpersonal conflict within a group of nerds playing role-playing games. And sometimes you got to deal with a bully. You know, there's even bullies among the nerds. Pretty good movie, though. 8 of 13 stars. I'd recommend it, especially if you're nerdy. Like me.